broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hi there. Good morning, everybody. I'm Jenny Bailey from the Agile Business Consortium, and welcome to the Agile Business Conference 2018 Reflective Insights webinar program. This is brought to you in association with SNC Lavalins Atkins, which is one of the world's most respected design, engineering, and project management consultancies. Obviously, without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to bring you such an amazing conference as we have done. So, yeah, we have to mention our sponsors and say a big, big thank you to them. Now, as you may know, we're conducting a series of these post-conference webinars where I'm fortunate enough to be chatting to some of our most influential speakers and people that made the conference such a great success. Just a little bit of housekeeping, I guess, before we go on from there. We're recording this broadcast, so you'll be able to watch it again in the future, and we'll actually put it up on the website for you. So also, we're happy to take questions, because I do believe the topic we're covering this morning, I don't think it will be quite a 30-minute one, probably more like a 40-50-minute one, actually, because we've got such a lot to share with you this morning. So yes, please feel free to put some questions in the chat box that you'll see on the webinar platform there. And if time permits, we'll get through as many as we can. So really, the Agile Business Conference 2018 happened back in almost just over 4 weeks ago, actually, on the 26th and 27th of September in London. Now, this year, our theme was Creating Generation Agile, where we looked at how we can prepare a generation to be successful in an uncertain world. And that we explored this through the Agile principles, and we looked at it through the lenses of people, strategy, and delivery. So we had about 320 people coming along to the conference, and it was a phenomenal event covering across those 2 days. And I'm talking today to Stuart Young, who is my guest in the studio, and he played a very valuable role at our conference. Stuart Young works at RadTac, and he is a business visualizer, an agile enthusiast, design thinker, in his own words, an empathy-driven storyteller, which I think is fantastic. So welcome, Stuart, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much for having me. I can't wait. It's been very exciting.
Brilliant. Now, your role at the conference was mammoth, really, I think, wasn't it? But really, I think we should just look at your bio and just put a little bit more onto your bio, because I was just thinking earlier we could have gone over to another page with your bio, because you also do a lot more than I've actually credited you for up there, haven't you?
Thank you very much. Well, apart from the photograph, I'm happy to talk about the history. So,
okay.
So absolutely. So when it comes to my background and who I am and what I do, I'm a business visualizer. To some, maybe more familiar with the idea of live illustration or graphic recording, which is bringing the talks and the conference discussions to life through pictures. Mm-hmm. But I'm also an agile trainer, coach, and passionate around design thinking. So do a multitude of things, but really using visualization as the glue for helping with generating ideas and solving problems.
Okay, fantastic. So tell us a little bit how you started. I mean, you've always been very creative, I'm guessing.
So yeah, absolutely. I try to ensure that people know that it's not an exclusive art, and that anyone can visualize and communicate using pictures. But yeah, I have to own up to the fact that I did go to art college and go on to do a design degree in illustration. So my vocation has always been to draw. But I think the most fundamental part of my life, with the most learning, was being a support worker and then running an accessible information project for adults with learning disabilities. And it was then that I realized that communication, visualization, and illustration can be used as a means of helping people with reading and writing difficulties to communicate. Mm-hmm. So that was quite a poignant learning part of my sort of lifelong learning. And from then I moved very sideways into a business analyst role, where visualization wasn't necessarily made use of as well as it could be. It was very much a sort of waterfall, traditional project management environment. And it was only later that I was introduced to agile ways of working, and my worlds collided, and I realized that there was this huge community and way of working where visualization could be used in the business context to help with generating ideas, simplifying complexity and solving problems.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So you were a very pivotal part, really, I believe, at the conference. I mean, we commissioned you to illustrate some of our keynote presentations, which was phenomenal, and you did an amazing job there. So thank you for doing that for us. But you also participated, didn't you, in doing a workshop together with Laura M. Powers, who's the CEO of Radtac in the USA. How did you find it?
It's so nice to be able to do the two, because as much as I enjoyed the live illustration and capturing the talks, and hope that adds as much value as possible for people to engage with and take that away. It's often people will look at that and think, well, that's just an exclusive thing that only certain people can do. So to actually deliver a workshop and to sort of unlock other people's capabilities and ensure that everybody knows that they can draw and visualize their ideas is quite powerful. So it's lovely to do the two together. But yeah, it was a great session, lots of energy, and well needed energy, because it was sort of close to the end of the day.
It was. That's right. No, we put our the workshop on at 3:45 roughly, didn't we, through to the end of the day, and there was three workshops running simultaneously. So I think you got a lot of people in there, because I think everyone's very interested, and I think everyone wants to be a bit creative. I think there's a drive there, isn't there?
100%. Yeah, I think for me it's all around trying to get a level of alignment. So when we think about the Agile context, and majority of those that were at the Agile Business Conference were from the Agile space. We talk about team collaboration, teaming, and sharing ideas, and that's probably the most powerful way to do that, because there is such a lack of alignment with the written word. So to get people to be creative and to share ideas is quite a powerful thing, and we definitely left people buzzing.
Brilliant. Now, you also did that amazing mind map for us as well, so we can't forget that. I mean, do you want to explain a little bit about the concept behind that?
Absolutely. So for those that were at the talk or go to any of my workshops, they'll know that when people say, my goodness, drawing all day, your hands must be really tired. It's the synthesis that's the hard bit, because the three-step process for visualizing is to actively listen, to synthesize your ideas, and then to draw. And whilst they say that it's good to be a generalist rather than an expert, and it's nice to share my ideas visually, it's much more powerful to get other people's synthesis. So the idea of the mind map was to think of the theme of the conference, which was, how are we preparing our young people to be successful and effective in an uncertain world? And actually out in the foyer area where it was very, very energetic all the way through the conference, it was very vibrant. We were asking people, how could you ask this question? And so I was getting lots of post-its and information from those members of the community and those that were attending to kind of provide their sound bites and their synthesis. So it was a collaborative visual mind map, which we could look at later in the slides here.
Yeah, absolutely, we can. So let's go on to some of your artwork then that you did for us. I mean, this was the reflective insights from creating Generation Agile. So what we have here is some of the keynote work, isn't it? And also the mind map that we've just been talking about. So I mean, it's phenomenal. I'm just thinking we should probably pause a little bit on here so people can obviously take a little time to see what's on here. But just in general, how do you work your brain? So obviously you're taking in information, you're drawing at the same time, as well as listening to the next information to put down into pictures. How does that work for you?
Lots of tea, lots of caffeine.
I can believe it. Fair enough.
So one of there's a lovely quote from a book called Sketchnoting, the Sketchnoting Handbook. Some people may be familiar with, and it says that the structure is the meat and veg, and the fancy drawing is the gravy on top.
Right.
So really what I really do is focus on the structure. Mm-hmm. So here you'll see this is very much a linear sort of approach, where I sort of use the numbering as a way in which you can sort of go from one bit of information to the next. So I took a very much of a kind of a journey flow or path there. But if you go back one slide, if it's possible,
yeah,
you'll you might see on the, we'll look at this in greater detail later, but on the right hand side there, the mind map, the visual that I created was in the middle there, and that's what we call a radial structure pattern. So the first thing that you do is think about sort of the structure and where the information can be presented. So that's the first thing that you do. That's the sort of first trickery for a live illustrator. And then the good old faithful post-it. So if you wanted to move on to the first keynote there with Sue.
Sure.
There you go. I'm very
I'm loving the red hair as well. I think that's fantastic.
I had a consistent feel, you see, with all my colours, and it's sort of what I felt I had no choice but to add the hair. So
we should just mention this is Dr. Sue Black, who's phenomenal, really. She's an OBE, isn't she? And she came along and did our first opening keynote for the conference on the first day of the conference. And she was phenomenal. And it was all about her agile life, wasn't it? And if I can do it, so can you. And she really took us through her life and kind of explained how, with her agile mindset, she has achieved what she's achieved, which was phenomenal, really, wasn't it?
Oh, it was absolutely fantastic. I've actually had the opportunity this is the second time that I've illustrated one of Sue's talks, Dr. Sue, and it's absolutely she has a fantastic story. She's an incredibly good storyteller, which is again one of the things that we try to do with visualization. And she has a very impactful, very engaging story. So, what most of the talk was around the wonderful work that she did at Bletchley Park, but really it's about her journey into Agile, how Agile kind of found her, and really a story of inclusion and diversity, and the wonderful stuff that she's done with to support women in tech and so forth was so powerful as a message.
Yeah, it was a phenomenal talk. It really was. Obviously, the stuff she's done with tech mums and saving Bletchley Park. I mean, she saved it. It was incredible, wasn't it? Really, what she did. And obviously, Stephen Fry played a part in that we were discussing earlier with the social media and the power of social media, really, as well.
Well, this is it. And again, from absolutely, Stephen Fry. I think made her the most famous person at that time on Twitter.
That's right.
Which just shows how powerful social media can be. But again, when you think about sort of the Bletchley Park element, there's a level of humour that you can try to bring out on the canvas here. And I remember she assumed that looking back at the days of the war, back in the 1940s, that Bletchley Park would have been full of men in tweed jackets smoking pipes, but actually 75% were women, and I think that was quite an amazing sort of bit of information that she shared with us then. And I think it's interesting to know that the imitation games was a great the imitation game was a great sort of bit of notoriety for Bletchley Park, but it was slightly sort of misleading in some of the facts there. So she told us the truth.
Yeah, and it was good to know because I'd only seen that film probably about a month prior to that, so I was like, oh yes, I've seen that. I know all about that that inventor and how amazing he was, and and then obviously she put us straight on a few things, but it's phenomenal. It really was. Her talk was really good, and what the work she's done in this arena is just incredible, and she's gone on from strength to strength. She really has. She's doing some great things. So she's one of those people to kind of keep an eye on, really, and see what she's going to be working on next, because she doesn't sit still, does she?
She doesn't. And we were talking as well just before this about inclusion and about sort of one of the themes about supporting our young people to be effective, and it's really sad. Her she felt like she was sort of on her own, a bit of a loner at school. It wasn't really for her at all. If you look at number 3 there, she was saying school wasn't for her, and she saw herself as a bit of a geek, and that's something she embraces now, right? And so whilst this talk was loosely about diversity and inclusion for women, it was much more about inclusion for everyone. And she was saying that working in conferences, you're the majority, but trying to get people that are the minority to feel part of the community is what she's really trying to do. And the wonderful work that you sort of refer to there about with mums in tech and so forth is wonderful, and it's probably more powerful for me than just the Bletchley Park bit. Getting people out, getting some people that have that felt, there's some great stories about mums that felt like they've really achieved something and felt like a real individual rather than just a mum, with some of the awesome sort of achievements they've made in tech, and it's really powerful stuff.
Absolutely, it is. I mean, it was a very, very good opening keynote to bring that agile mind and her life and what she's achieved and what can be achieved with the right ideas and the right determination into focus. I think was really valuable, definitely, for the start of the conference. So then, should we just move on to the next one then? This was nurturing next generation of fearless learners, and this was very apt, actually, wasn't it? Because this was Bill Mills from Explore Learning and his passion behind the whole brand of Explore Learning, which actually teach let's think 5 to 14-year-olds, I think it is. You may see some of the centres, they're posted in Sainsbury's throughout the country, and I think there's about 17 of them now. But I like what you've picked up here, Stuart. I really do, how you put this one together.
Yeah, I think that the key. It says his the summary of his talk really does say what he's going to talk about, and it was very clear that it was focusing on people, and there was no smoke and mirrors. It was really about sort of putting a lot of supporting the team, supporting the staff members, and trying to support the pupils. And I think that was the kind of the central key part to this was this. You need to help to inspire people and encourage people to be fearless and have that attitude. And it was, like I say, it wasn't just to do with the pupils, but it's also to do with the staff and getting the tutors to be inspiring.
Absolutely. And I can say that, I mean, my children actually do go to Explore Learning, and the tutors are always inspiring. That they're incredible. The energy that's there is phenomenal. But when I was talking to them about this presentation, it was very interesting because obviously they're working with children who are, in essence, agile beings anyway, aren't they, children? Let's face it. But also that's like the external, but internal within their organisation. They'd won awards for being one of the top organisations in the country to work for instance. And they have a whole well-being department where 4 people are constantly coming up with ideas of how to encourage and engage their workforce and keep everybody happy. And that's a real change, isn't it? A sea change, really, from how it used to be, 10, 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I think that there's we're talking about this. Whilst one of the most awesome things I think about the Agile Business Conference was the variety of different talks from different industries, but there was sort of a key theme for me was that Peter Cheese, so further down, actually his illustrations from his talk relate a lot to the talk from the illustration before, where it was all around sort of supporting individuals to this experiential learning. This idea that we're not just going to teach people by sitting down in a very waterfall approach. Experiential, collaborative learning is the way forward. So we'll come to that when we get to the visuals. But so lots of sort of shared sort of key themes there.
Yeah, I think people was one of the main things that came out of the conference this year. There's always a kind of a turning point or an understanding or a topic that just looms. But I think it was people very much at this one, wasn't it? Didn't you find?
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. And again, not so much just the people, but the young people. And like you've just sort of related to that, when we'll come to the mind map later, but the fact that children do think in an agile way, they're pragmatic. They want to explore things, and it's only when you sort of hit the adult learning and you go into work that sometimes that can be taken away, which is much what this talk here was all about. Really, is about creating the right environment for learning.
Yes. Now, this talk that we're showing now, this was the D's Shaping the Future of Work. Now, this was Dr. Nicola Millard, who's a futurist, and she looks after the insights and everything at British Telecom. And her talk was on the second day, and she was the opening keynote, wasn't she, on the second day? And she was just fantastic because, we were all a bit concerned what the D's were. I mean, we had the title for a while and we were kind of thinking, what are the D's shaping the future of the work? We don't know. We could have guessed at a few, but when she came out and delivered these, they just hit the mark, I think, for everybody.
Oh, there was a level of humour and honesty that came from this talk, and it was absolute. I don't think there was anyone that wasn't laughing, but it was so true. And I think there was. What was really nice about this talk was there's a level of honesty about the positive that digital working and technology brings, and also, you know, some of the problems that come with that. So it was very interesting. You know, such, the fact that distance is the death of distance. So trying to get people to collaborate more effectively is good, and don't be sort of linked just geographically. Allow people to be cross-functional through distributed teams. But at the same time, if you look at the point 5 there, video calls aren't for everyone. So
No.
There's a real nice element of truth in this, in that you do need an ounce of there's an ounce of goods and bads in everything.
Yeah, and I think with her role as well, I mean, she is so well placed to really look at all this and look at the research that they're gathering, and all the studies that they're doing. So, I mean, like you say, this was so honest when it came across. One thing that one of her quotes was, "When do you turn off when you can work anywhere, anytime, any place?" We all need downtime, and the problem is disconnection. And I think we can relate to that. If we all have laptops and we all go home, we all sort of go, "Oh, well, I just need to check this." And I do it myself sometimes. So you actually have to kind of master the act of going, "No more. I've closed the laptop now. It's done for the day," and not try and get ahead for the next day. But yes, it is that we need to be more, I think, masterful on those plans, really, of how we all work. And that's changing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that you were just saying there, finding the mental off switch. I think with the use of Slack and other social media things, there really is this wonderful opportunity for constant collaboration, but actually there needs to be an off switch, a mental off switch for doing that.
Yes, definitely.
A lovely thing about sort of, and I think a later talk relates to this as well, in that droids won't replace us, right? So there's some wonderful things.
That's good news, isn't it? Don't you think?
Absolutely. But the fact that the human factors of empathy and some of the things that come from visualization as well, the fact that you can't really ask Siri about discussing complexity, so that there's something to be said for people and interactions. So yeah, it was a wonderful talk, very truthful and very funny.
And also on the left hand side as well, you captured the most disruptive part of tech is us in big letters. So I think that's very telling as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So no, it was really good, and the culture element to this and everything else. But yeah, it was a great talk, great talk.
I mean, I guess for the drawing purposes, that was more of an easier one because she had the 7 Ds, didn't she?
Yeah, so this is the thing. Once you've looked at the structure, it's wonderful if you hear someone say, "Right, I'm going to be talking about 6 points or 7 points."
Yes, that's right.
You go to as everyone in the Agile space would like to know, the Post-it, the famous Post-it, is a wonderful tool. So I put the Post-its out around the canvas, and that's a great way to sort of look at the structure again. And then at least you've got the spacing right. So it's very helpful when she says, "I'm going to be talking about the 7 Ds." Yes. So yeah, that was quite helpful.
Yeah, I'm about to say, because we didn't give you any insights of any of the speakers' presentations. It was really literally on the day, and you're kind of thrown in there at the back of the room with your canvas and go, "Right, we need this illustrated." So it's phenomenal skill you possess. It really is. Needs to be said. It's phenomenal.
Thank you. It's very, very kind of you to say. And it's more about synthesizing the key elements, taking the essence of the talk. So that's why sometimes it's kind of good if you're not necessarily an expert. Although I worked in the Agile space for 10 years, it's more a case of listening and synthesizing that information so that you're acting as a filter for other people. But the more you know of the talk, sometimes you can create a bit of a bias and you have your own view. So just listening in and just drawing is live is the best way to do it.
Okay, so this one then, Agile Within HR. Now this was Peter Cheese, the CEO of CIPD. He came and gave another great and very down to earth, I thought, presentation for us, didn't he, about Agile and its place within HR. And that's fairly a new concept as well. So he was really looking into that. And one thing that he said is we need to put the human back into human resources, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, and this is what I was going back to your point just then. If I'd have really studied Agile within HR, I think his talk was much beyond agile within HR. It was focusing on some of the things we talked about with the D's there in the last talk. It's all around a new way of learning, and he was again very funny, and he talked about this need for experiential learning. And his daughter, he'll get home that night and his daughter's on her iPad and everyone's on their computers, and he's saying, shouldn't you be doing your homework? And she's like, well, I am.
Yes.
And Google has the answer. So it's a different way of learning. He brought some very good sort of stories to life, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And you've captured some lovely things here. We need to create human-centric future. Definitely, we certainly do. And forces shaping the future of work, social, demographic change, economic uncertainty, technological change. It all comes into it. It really does. And yeah. Actually, I mean, he was so comfortable on the stage, wasn't he, Peter? I was a bit concerned about the time at one point, in all honesty, because I think we were going into the next session, and I didn't want to be delayed in any way. So I think we had to hurry his last part up. But what he was saying, I certainly didn't want to stop him. I really didn't. I thought he was such a good speaker.
Again, it was sort of agile within HR from the trenches, and I think it was because
good point. Yes.
He related to everything that we would agree with. And he mentioned the bottom right here, flexible working is important, that life work balance, but it doesn't mean removing desk and hot desking. And I think there's a real point here is the danger of terminology. And I remember back in the day when I worked for local authority as an analyst, and it was like, we are, agile ways of working. We're doing agile. And in some people's minds, they thought, oh, we're home working.
Yes.
And there was a lack of collaboration. No one actually got work done because there was no interactions. And it's so dangerous when people falsely sell things. So, yes, flexible working, but not removing desks and so forth. So again, a very sort of truthful and accurate representation of the current sort of trends in the workplace.
Absolutely. I think, like you said there, the language can say a lot, but you have to get the language right. I've done a few webinars where we've been discussing the language and the terminology that we use for agile phrases and agile principles and all that sort of thing. And it can get very confusing. I mean, people take agile in a different sense than they are thinking of hot desking, hoteling. They're thinking of car parking spaces and all that sort of thing. And that's far, far, far removed from the agile principles, the way of working, and like the best practices that we're all working with in the agile space for transformation and business agility.
Absolutely, and if we get the chance, this is exactly what I was talking about in some of the slides within my talk. And it's the written word or the spoken word is actually rather abstract, and that's why pictures are the clearest way to get something across. And that's the, half the problem, half the battle is that lack of understanding and how subjective the written word can be.
Brilliant. Okay, well let's look at our mind map now, because we've gone through some of the keynote presenters there that you captured for us so fantastically well. We're back to our mind map, and this was really all about how we're preparing our young people to be successful in such an uncertain world, and they have to be adaptive and all these things that they have to have more strings to their bow now than they've ever had before. Nothing is certain anymore, is it? But people were coming up to you with post-its and asking you to draw these sort of elements on, weren't they? And one of the ones which I loved was kids mentoring the C-suite. I thought that was fantastic.
It was top right hand corner there, and the bottom left hand corner there was some quite there was a consensus with a lot of people's thoughts, and this is so right. I mean, there was the obvious discussion around changing the way we educate, putting Kanban in, training teaming and collaboration, and embracing failure, that first attempt in learning. But like you said, the great things were kids mentoring the C-level, and actually at the bottom left hand corner there, actually make more space for young people. Actually, we can prepare our young people by involving them, including them, and actually listening to them. Because after all, for those that are listening in that have maybe been on an agile training course, may be familiar with the marshmallow challenge, where you have to make the largest freestanding marshmallow tower. And it's all around. And when you think about sort of the best people at doing that, it's been proven that children are the best because they're pragmatic. They think this way.
They do.
And unfortunately, it kind of gets taken away from us. That there's a sort of a traditional way of working, and we discussed this a bit earlier, Jenny, in that the wonderful thing is that a lot of the young people that I teach and train, they're like, well, this agile stuff makes sense. This relates to the sort of stuff that we're doing at school. But tell me more about waterfall. Tell me more about this thing that you call waterfall, because it doesn't make sense. So it's actually nice to know that, people, this collaborative approach, this experiential learning, this opportunity to fail and learn through failure,
Sure.
and this in embracing empiricism,
Yes.
is something that's sort of really being pushed in at school. So it's very exciting. There's a lot of sort of discussion around this board.
Yes, I think there is, and I think a lot of people can take note of this as well. The one thing that obviously came through also at the conference was when Liam Russell was there, and he was speaking from Google. He was obviously talking about their Project Aristotle and the psychological safety element of working in teams. And I think children have got that down to a fine art almost as well. They don't fear that kind of, well, if I put my hand up, I might get in trouble, or I might say the wrong thing. They just seem, it's much more freer, and that there's a sense of freedom about it, I think, when children come together. It's incredible.
Absolutely. My son's doing his GCSEs this year, or whatever it may be. I think it's still called GCSEs. Very confusing.
Yes, I know. Not quite there yet with mine, but yes.
I called him the other evening. I said, yeah, I thought you were doing your homework, and he was saying, I'm phoning. We have been told we must collaborate when we're doing homework, because we can teach each other, and we can share ideas. And
Wow.
As much as I want to tell him to put his phone down, and he caught me out, because it's true. It's a key thing now, this collaborative approach to learning, which is wonderful.
And yeah, I'm also aware there's postgraduate students out there that are fighting collaboration. They don't want to collaborate; they want to work on their own, and that's come to light as well. So there's both ends there, isn't there? And obviously the collaborating and coming together and learning and having that one experience, if you like, together is so much more stronger. But at the other end, in another generation, possibly they're fighting it. So I think the more we can get this message out, the better, because this has to be, with psychological safety and all those things put into place, the best learning environment where people can come together and amazing transformations can happen.
This is absolutely true. I think for some people that are more introverted, I've heard that you think about it, it's actually quite it's quite scary, this idea of having to collaborate and be all the sort of where an extroverted character would feel more comfortable, and there's lots of movement around sort of silent collaboration, and I think that's a really key point. And I think that's why sometimes, again, visualization could be a powerful way to collaborate silently and to ensure there's a common theme, and that you can generate ideas collaboratively without sort of feeling like you have to stand and discuss things,
Absolutely. Oh, well, I mean, that leads us perfectly really into visualization is the superpower you didn't know you had, which is your workshop title that you did at the conference. So talk us through these slides really. Obviously it's a great title, and I'm sure you got a lot of interest there, that's for sure.
Well, the idea being, one of the biggest obstacles to maximizing business agility is poor communication, and 90% of the information that's transmitted to the brain is visual. So the message was it's time to untap this superpower. This visual here was in relation to lots of exercises that were going on during the session, and we actually, very early on, we said, right, turn to the person next to you and draw them.
Right.
and I sort of, and the funny thing is I always say, so what was the first thought that went through your mind when you presented your picture? And everyone says, sorry. So there is a level of vulnerability. The wonderful thing about drawing is that, it does create vulnerability. Everyone doesn't think they can draw. But when we think about creating an environment where there's more of a holacracy, a flat, there's alignment, and there's no sort of there's no hierarchy, and you're wanting to work with stakeholders or teams and so forth. Visualizing is a great way to find that common level. The other thing here as well is that the sad thing is that children will draw to share their ideas. They don't care how fancy their drawings are, as long as their ideas are portrayed. Yet when we become adults and we're working in, in the product development, project management space, sometimes that sort of becomes sort of something you forget, and it's very sad. It's not, you don't see it as often.
Yeah, it is. It is very sad. I think we all need to be a bit more creative and be a bit more free with our expressions, I think, when it comes to drawing as well. I mean, I think I can do one of those dogs, those sausage dogs, where you start off with the person and yeah, something like that. But it's fun. I mean, like you said, doodling, it's some people actually take on a lot of information while they're doodling, don't they? When they're sitting in a classroom, for instance. And it used to be very much frowned upon, didn't it, doodling? If you're sitting in a classroom, you should be, I guess when we were at school, it was like you should be learning what's going on, being alert to what's going on, applying yourself, being engaged, rather than sitting there doodling. But it's been proved actually now, hasn't it? The doodling it's another way the information is being retained and it's going into the brain.
Absolutely, and this. So if you think about whether you believe in the theories of the different dominant hemispheres that kind of dates back to the 1960s here, you have people that are sort of more left side of the brain thinkers, so they're more sequential, linear thinkers, analytical, see the detail first, versus sort of right brain, big picture thinking, and that creative element. So going back to what you were saying there, that's a really important skill of using visualization as a way of learning. And again, when you think about cross-functional teams, it's great to have a lovely combination of the detailed people and the big picture thinkers. So you can think about the visions, the roadmaps. I did a lot of sort of customer journey mapping, touching a lot on sort of the design thinking space as well as agile space, and helping in that kind of service design approach. And visualization really is powerful there.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And like you say here, it's been going for a long time as well, hasn't it?
Absolutely. So there's proof that anthropologists have proven that cave painting that dates back over 40,000 years was actually used to transmit information. So it wasn't just nice, pretty pictures. It was a way in which to communicate. So it's a powerful thing people have been doing for many years. This slide here was an exercise, and what was interesting is that I got people to draw each of these things, and then we had some stations to upload them. So there's lots of bustle and people moving around. And I asked people, what was the hardest thing to draw? And everyone will say business agility, and I'll say why? And it's because it's abstract. So yes. What we're also focused with is going back to cave paintings in hieroglyphics. There's lots of things that are idea graphs that are sort of abstract in context. And then there's certain things that are more tangible, such as pictographs. And in the agile space, we're riddled in idea graphs. There's retrospectives, refinement, lots of words that sort of aren't necessarily tangible. So it's really good to think of a way in which you can draw. The other thing about this exercise was everyone's minds work differently. And I could tell everyone how to draw a phone or agile, but then it's a bit of a bias because you'll always draw it that way. But the wonderful thing is if you get everyone to draw something at the same time, you can see just how broad people's perceptions are of how when they synthesize an idea of drawing something. And a couple of little tricks for those that are on the session, on this webinar, hoping to get some takeaways. One is that if you know there's something that you need to draw, and you're thinking, how on earth would I do that? First, you good old Google Images. If you type the word icon afterwards, you'll find something nice and simple. And the other thing is that if you draw something more than 50 times, so it sounds quite repetitive, but it will become part of your muscle memory, and it's a lot easier to sort of bring it out and draw it.
That's incredible. Muscle memory. I've never heard of that when it comes to drawing before.
Yeah, so it becomes if you continuously draw the same thing again and again and again, it's much easier to bring that out. So for those here that are coaches and trainers and teachers, and if you know you're going to be drawing a specific thing, then yeah, you can sort of make it sort of stick within your mind.
That's incredible. Wow. Okay, so symbol hierarchy then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to sort of. I do a lot now. I'm working with RadTac. I've been with RadTac for 3 years, but I'm the last year or so been focusing on in the design and innovation space, the design and innovation practice practice lead, and we looking at sort of design thinking as well. And so there's tools and techniques that I've discovered that maybe are more adopted in the more sort of familiar in the agile space or design thinking space. And this here, the symbol hierarchy, relates to my background working within social care, again with adults with disabilities. So I like to share as much as I can and not to sort of have a sort of silo approach to where things belong. But this was really interesting, and I always sort of come back to this, in that, you know, when we're trying to explain something, you know, there's a level of abstraction. Some things are more abstract than others. So, for example, if I were to describe an elephant, the best thing I can do is to bring in a real elephant, the real object. You know, that's the clearest way to represent something. And then as you go up this pyramid from miniature object, or what we back in the day would call an object of reference, which is really good for adults with more profound and multiple learning disabilities, to sensory reference, to communicate. And then as we go up, we go all the way through drawings, actually, you know, up there at the second one, and then some symbols. But the most abstract form is the written word. And so when you think of that, and if we relate this to the next slide, if you wouldn't mind moving forward, one more slide. This very, very famous IT project, you know, I don't think there's many agile trainers that haven't got this slide in their slide deck or had it in their slide at some stage.
Yeah.
But it's such a powerful visual. It's still very very relevant. And again, you know, it's the written word. You know, how the product owner described it, how the business analyst created it. You know, there's a lack of, and I've been there. I've worked working on project you know, PIDs and briefs. You know, good old-fashioned Prince 2 approach, and yeah, and there's been a lack of kind of cohesion with how things are. But if we actually illustrated it, if we actually drew our requirements, if we actually drew a customer journey, identified those key moments of truth, identified you know, what our customers want, went back to that experiential learning, then it's there's probably less threat of sort of having a lack of alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it makes so much sense. It really does. I remember also being in some of those exercises at other conferences or seminars that I've attended, where they've said, right, draw a horizontal line, and then at a right angle, draw a line half as long, and you know, they give you the instructions, and what they actually wanted you to do was draw a house. But then everyone looks at their bits of paper after they've kind of given the instructions, and people have got lines going off the page, and it looks nothing like a house. And again, it's that interpretation, isn't it? Like you say, and that language again, like we've discussed.
Absolutely. It's a common language. So those again that maybe Scrum Masters and so forth maybe use graphic metaphors. Graphic metaphors are a great way to discuss. You know, graphic metaphors, whether it be a vehicle metaphor or a journey metaphor. Vehicle metaphors are great to find out, to retrospect over, you know, how can we improve, what's holding us back. And journey metaphors are great for roadmaps. So using visuals to get a consensus and to get everyone aligned is great. So this slide here is really around some of these key visual tips that I share with those that come on my visual thinking skills workshop. So I'm very privileged to have sort of delivered this workshop globally now, and this is actually in San Diego, I think a couple of years ago. So this is really just a few things to remind people. So whilst they're learning to visualize, I always get them to relate and to refer back to this visual on the left here. So if I quickly go through it, just to remind yourself, you know, when we're thinking about visual thinking, we're not wishing to discard our children's pictures from the fridge and then put our lovely paintings on there. What we're doing,
Okay.
well, I always say to people, if you finish my workshop and you end up sort of, you know, throwing your kids' work off the fridge, that's great, but that's not what we're trying to do here. But it's about not being too precious. So it's about sort of helping people to communicate. And this, keep calm and carry on. Don't worry if you spell something wrong. Don't worry if your drawing doesn't look great. You know, it is a universal language. The chances are people can understand what you've drawn. You're just being slightly precious. And number 3 here, communication over decoration. I do teach people how to make their flip charts dazzle and pop, and look sort of how you can make them look nice. But really, you're just trying to communicate. You know, a lot of people will say to me, I don't draw, but I so often get a bit of paper and scribble ideas down and show lots of patterns and blah, blah, you know, when I'm talking to stakeholders. And I say, unfortunately, I hate to burst your bubble, but that's drawing. You know, that is,
yes,
that's
exactly.
what it is.
That's what we're talking about. Yes.
Exactly that. Lots in the space, which is great, following the awesome work of Dave Snowden and so forth. You know, we talk about systems thinking, complexity thinking, you know, when we think about, you know, it's a, you know, messiness. You know, if something looks messy, that can actually present a really good message. You know, back in the day, I was asked to kind of create an as-is process map using Visio, and it was incredibly busy, incredibly messy. And I thought, you know, failure bow, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, it's not helpful. But the program manager said, this is great, this tells a story that, you know, our current processes are messy. Right. So, you know, messy is actually a powerful thing.
Yeah.
It's a process over art. It's not the output. It's to do with how you can interact, how you can tell a story, and how you can work with people. And if we get a chance, I can show you an example of that later on. Practice makes perfect. And the key thing here, simplicity is key. You know, as it says here with a quote from Leonardo da Vinci, you know, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I think a lot of people will get that from the workshop, is that keep it simple, keep it nice and clean. And that's the best way to draw.
Are they in any particular order, having "Don't Be Precious" at the top? Because I can imagine some people almost like want to sketch it first and then go over it again and sort of have more of a creative kind of, I want to do this right, and you know, I don't want to do it wrong, you know, so they've got that kind of fear thing going on. So are they in any particular order, or is it just like those 7 points need to be established?
Yeah, there's some more that I like to add around structure and around active listening, but no, there's not necessarily an order. But it's a good point that you make. You know, I often will tell people to put the pencils down and to remove the, you know, and be brave. But you know, the left brain thinkers, sometimes the people that like the detail, will sometimes reach for the pencil first. And again, it's not a problem. But it's, if you're doing storyboarding, for example, to use layout pads is a nice. If you are a detail person and you can't help but be precious, use your pencil, you know, hold on to your security blanket, but then, you know, using a layout sheet or something transparent, put another page over the top, and then ask yourself, what lines really matter? What are the key elements of this? How can we remove the noise? And that can be a good way to reduce the need for detail and the need for being too precious.
Yeah, no, good point, definitely. Okay, so in terms of the business side of things then, visualize ideas is obviously, that's what we're talking about. That's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah, so there were four visuals here on this slide. When I ask people, you know, why visualize, people talk about there's a multitude of reasons and purposes, but I put it underneath within three categories of participation and engagement, which is essentially what I was doing at the conference with the live illustration and back when I was working with adults with disabilities. And the other two areas for me are idea mapping and problem solving. And if you think of every single meeting, whether it be, you know, a paired meeting between two people, whether it be a retrospective, whether it be a requirements gathering workshop with stakeholders, whatever the meeting, whatever the need to discuss stuff, you're always generating ideas or trying to solve problems. That, you know, and when you categorize it like that, it works for everybody. And the four areas that I focus on as case studies are visualizing ideas, visualizing problems, storytelling, and collaboration. So if we go forward, I've got sort of a slide for each, which may help. So, you know, visualizing ideas. So again, be that in a retrospective or in the sort of ideation phase within design thinking and the design thinking cycle, visualizing is a powerful way to generate ideas, unearth ideas. And you'll see that in each of those pictures there, people have actually used graphic templates. So the other really powerful thing here is that you don't need, and in the bottom photograph there, you'll see in the back wall, they're all the templates that I've created over time. And the famous one at the top right there, which is the empathy mapping one from Dave Gray. But with all these things, you don't have to be a really fantastic illustrator to be able to visualize ideas. You can create some templates, you can draw them up, and be all precious, the day before, or sort of print out some of these templates. And then you can work with stakeholders and with team members, and you can use Post-its to cluster ideas. So you don't even need to draw to be able to create an environment for visual thinking. So visualizing ideas, there's lots to be said for when and where, but visualization is a really powerful tool here.
Absolutely. Post-its. We need to get more Post-its, clearly. Okay, so
Absolutely.
visualizing problems, then that takes it on to another stage, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and I think that often when we're generating ideas, we're often solving problems. The two kind of blend. But when I've done some large-scale planning, the top left-hand corner here, this was at a large-scale planning event using SAFe, and a lot of the arts there. And what we found was that when you visualize these things, we find that you can see that there's lots of dependencies, and it makes and it actually kind of identifies the problems. So Steve Denning once said, when he talked about leadership storytelling, that a story doesn't always have to have a happy ending. You're not here to visualize things again and make them pretty. You're there to kind of to ensure that you can clarify where the key constraints are and the key problems. And again, I remember drawing a customer journey, mixing and combining that with lean value stream mapping, and identifying the value and non-value add exercises and activities, and visualizing that in a storyboard, and sharing that with service managers and counselors. And it was an alarming visual, but it was really fundamental, and I was sort of given some sort of attribution for that. Others maybe not so much, but it was really powerful. So problem solving with visuals is a very quick way to get things across. And again, it sort of blends with empathy, visualization, creativity, and empathy. So drawing pictures is a very powerful way to unearth these things. Absolutely.
And then obviously we move on to storytelling as well.
Absolutely. So storytelling, and this if you there's a few more slides that go on to this one, and then to build it up. So this top left hand corner, this is just to prove what I'm saying about sort of not being too precious. So as a business visualizer, I recently went and worked with a high street bank, and they said, can you draw our process for our business transformation and how we support the organization with agility? And it was one of those moments where I was looking at them and they were looking at me, and I was almost like a rabbit in spotlights thinking, what am I going to do? And the end of day one was that top picture, and I felt ashamed that there was nothing wonderfully, on that, it wasn't a work of art. It certainly wasn't something you'd put on your fridge. It was structure, and there was flow, and there was clarity over how the work comes in, how people go through their own individual learning journey, and how their individual team supports the process. And the second day, I drew the picture just on the middle on the left there, and it wasn't until I took it back into London, shared it with the team, and said, put Post-its down where it needs to change, and you couldn't see a picture through the Post-its.
Wow.
And again, failure bow, I thought, but no, it was what they wanted. They needed, sometimes you need a visual to identify the problem. So this is, again, process over art. But it's a very clear way of doing storytelling, and it's a very iterative and incremental approach. I do a lot of whiteboard animation, and it's getting the storyboard right first, getting those frames right first, sharing that before you move on to the more technical stuff. This is the really powerful bit. But yeah, storytelling, customer journey mapping, and looking at internal constraints with internal processes. Visualize them, get it up, and share ideas.
Absolutely. No, it's hugely worthwhile. It really is, because it crystallizes so many paths, really, doesn't it? It kind of just cuts through some of the uncertainty, because if you've actually drawn it, it's there. And like you say, then people can change it if they don't agree with it, I guess, really. And it can go out to the wider remit, if you like, with the delegates.
It's, the idea with visualization is, for me, is to simplify complexity and to help with business alignment. So if you draw something and you can share that across the business with key stakeholders, that's a really powerful thing. And in the Western world, majority of us will read from left to right and top to bottom. So there's a kind of a rule there. So it's very clear a way in which we can communicate. So whilst you often say that visualization is a facilitative tool for someone to explain something, there's no reason why you couldn't sort of look at that on your own, much like a comic book, and sort of read it through, and it's got a clear narrative without needing a level of facilitation.
Absolutely. No, it's fantastic. It really is. And although the skill that you have to do that is phenomenal as well, really, Stuart, because I don't think I'd be able to draw it like that. I'd be able to make some marks on some paper, but I'm probably being too precious now about my skills.
Yeah, you will make. It's true, but you can see that I've broken the rule, and I've gone from being precious as well.
Yes.
But there's a thin line. But yeah, practice makes better.
It does, and I need to get some ideas on those icons and then draw them out 50 times, and then I'll be able to. Yeah, I'm thinking that's really quite interesting about the whole muscle memory thing. So 50 times and 100 times, and I'll be even better at it, won't I? After I've done that.
And you're always welcome on one of my workshops too. How's about that?
That's very kind, Stuart. I'll be there like a shot. Absolutely. Right, we've got to the part of the webinar where we're going to be asking if there's any questions coming through. I know we're a little bit stuck on time, in all honesty. I can see a few, but I think we've answered them in one way or another about storytelling and capturing ideas and everything. So I don't know if we've got a lot of time really to answer that many of them, but they seem to be coming through. But in all honesty, Stuart, I think we have answered them. But if there's any more there, I do think we're out of time at the moment, but if there's any more there, I'll put them to you after the webinar on some emails, and maybe when we do, we can send it out to everyone that's registered, if you like. We can do it that way, just to make sure that everyone's catered for if there's any extra questions coming in. As with all our webinars, though, we do like to keep our conversations flowing and discussions flowing. So if there are further questions, like we say, then send them through to us, jenny@agilebusiness.org. That's my email address. I'll put them through to Stuart, and we can keep the discussions flowing, because I think this is a very, very valid conversation to have, definitely, and we're here to help in any way we can. So without further ado, I've got to say a huge, huge thank you, Stuart, for your time this morning to cover off not just the work you did for us at the conference, the Agile Business Conference, about a month ago now, but also the understanding, the insights that you've given us of your experience and your whole take on it, really, what you believe and how you actually put it together, your whole ethos on how you work. I think it's been really, really insightful, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time and joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's been a great honour. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Fantastic. Thank you again. Okay, well, the last slide that we have here is obviously giving you some information now for next year. I'm really racking my brains at the moment trying to think how we're going to improve the Agile Business Conference for next year, for 2019. Stuart, if you have any ideas, then please let us know, because we've had some amazing feedback from this year's conference. Everyone's still raving about the event. So if you attended, a lot of the presentations are up on the website now at agileconference.org. We are still editing the many films that we filmed over the course of the 2 days, and they'll be coming to you on social media and also on our website very soon also. So you may actually, if you did attend, you may actually be able to spot yourself. And if you were one of our lovely delegates, speakers, and influential people that actually went to camera for us, you'll definitely be able to spot yourself, because we got some amazing insights as well from people and what they said. So we'll be releasing those in due course. So the date then for next year is the 25th and 26th of September. We'll be in London, and so please keep an eye out for more information. We'll be releasing it shortly on our social media channels and also our websites, the consortium website and also the conference website. But for me, for now, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a lovely talking to you, and look out for more post-conference reflective insights webinars, because I'll be bringing you a few more in the lead up to Christmas. And also, I've just got to say a big thank you again to our sponsors. So this Agile Business Conference Reflective Insights webinar was brought to you in association with SNC Lavalins Atkins, and they are one of the world's most respected design, engineering and project management consultancies. So for me, for now, thank you again for joining us. Look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye bye.